we're diving into Leviticus Chapter 7.
Okay.
And I know Leviticus can sometimes feel like just, a huge list of rules and regulations.
Right.
But stick with us because if we kind of dig beneath the surface, these instructions for all these different kinds of offerings can actually give us a pretty amazing glimpse into like the whole ritual system and like the core beliefs of this really different time and place.
Absolutely.
So think of it as like a fast track to understanding a whole historical and cultural world that's pretty unlike our own.
Yeah, a real window into the past.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to be looking specifically at several different offerings. We got the guilt offering, we got the fellowship offering.
The sin offering.
Yep, the sin offering. Can't forget that one. The burnt offering, the grain offering.
Oh, and we'll come across mention of the ordination offering as well.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Tucked in there with all the other instructions. So our mission, for this whole deep dive is to untangle the key rules. And really importantly, like the distinctions between all these different offerings, what made them unique and what do these very specific, very detailed procedures actually tell us about how people, the priests and like the divine, all interacted in this ancient system.
Yeah, it's all about these relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get right into it. And let's start with something that the text calls most holy, the guilt offering.
All right, the guilt offering, as you said, it's marked as most holy right off the bat. So we know this one's special. It's got a special status, and the instructions for it are super specific, like where it's supposed to be slaughtered.
Oh, right.
It's got to be in the same place as the burnt offering. So that already hints at a kind of shared level of like sanctity or maybe even a shared procedure.
Yeah, a connection there for sure.
And then there's how the blood's handled. It's going to be splashed against all sides of the altar.
Interesting. Okay, so it's not just, any part of the animal that's offered up, right? Like the instructions are really precise about what pieces are included.
Exactly.
It's all the fat, right? We've got the broad tail, the fat covering the internal organs.
Both kidneys going to have those.
Kidneys, yep, and the fat around those.
And even the long lobe of the liver.
The liver, yeah. And it's specifically saying that lobe is removed with the kidneys. So it's all very deliberate. Like why these parts, why not others?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think if we look at other ancient cultures, we see that fat was often seen as like the best part. Right?
Yeah, interesting.
The richest, most vital part.
Yeah.
So maybe offering it symbolized giving like the very best to the divine.
That makes sense. Yeah, like a real dedication almost.
Yeah, and you see that idea in other religious practices from around the same time too.
And it actually says right here in the text that the burning of the fat on the altar, it's a food offering presented to the Lord.
Right, so there's that direct connection between the offering and the divine.
Okay, so we're offering these richest parts as a sign of, dedication, seeking favor, maybe even reconciliation.
Possibly, yeah.
All right, so who gets to eat this most holy offering? Because it's not just, for everyone, is it?
Definitely not. The regulations are very clear on this. Only men from a priest's family can eat it.
Okay, so it's a family affair.
Yeah, and even then, there's another rule. It has to be eaten inside the sanctuary area.
Oh, wow, so it's like extra special.
Right, it's like this super restricted consumption. It really highlights how sacred this offering is.
Yeah, and it probably, reinforces the whole role and authority of the priests, right? Like they're the ones who get to handle and consume this really sacred food.
Exactly, it sets them apart.
Yeah, so super controlled in terms of who can eat it and where, like you were saying before, this idea of separating the sacred from the everyday, the profane.
Keeping those boundaries.
Okay, and here's an important point. The text specifically says that the same law applies to both the sin offering and the guilt offering, and it even says they belong to the priest who makes atonement with them.
Right, so there's this clear link between these two types of offerings and the idea of atonement, which is, basically making amends for wrongdoing.
Yeah, seeking forgiveness, basically.
Yeah, and although both offerings deal with, like, transgressions, the guilt offering, it usually had to do with offenses that needed some kind of restitution.
Oh, like you got to pay something back.
Right, exactly. While the sin offering could cover like a wider range of unintentional impurities.
Okay, so more like accidental stuff.
Yeah, and it's the priest who performs the ritual, to cleanse and reconcile with the divine, so they become the owner of these offerings.
So they're like intermediaries in a way.
Exactly, they bridge the gap between the people and the divine.
Okay, now just shifting gears a little bit, the text also mentions the burnt offering and the grain offering, but in relation to what the priests receive. So it says here that the priest who offers up a burnt offering gets to keep the hide.
Yeah, kind of a practical perk.
Yeah, it is pretty practical, right? Like a direct benefit for their service in that specific ritual.
A little bonus.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the green offerings. The text outlines, you know how those belong to the priest too, and it depends on how they're prepared.
Right, like if they're baked in an oven or
Yeah.
cooked in a pan or on a griddle.
Yep. And also whether they're mixed with oil or if they're dry.
And there's that interesting distinction with the dry offerings.
Oh, yeah. What was that again?
Those belong to all the sons of Aaron equally.
Oh, right. So it's more of a communal benefit within the whole priestly order.
Exactly. Everyone gets a share.
Okay, so let's move on to the fellowship offering, because this one sounds like it involves a lot more people.
Yeah, it does. The text introduces it as something that anyone can present to the Lord.
So right away, it's different from the guilt and sin offerings, which are more about atonement and the priest's role.
Right. This one's open to everyone.
Yeah. Much more inclusive. And there are different rules depending on the reason for the offering, right? So first, let's look at the thank offering. What are the details for that one?
Okay, so for a thank offering, along with the animal sacrifice, the person bringing it also has to bring specific kinds of unleavened bread with olive oil.
Okay, so bread is involved too. Interesting.
Yeah, it is not just any bread. It's got to be thick loaves mixed with the oil and then thin loaves with oil brushed on top.
Wow, so there's like a whole variety.
Yeah, and then on top of that, they have to bring well-kneaded leavened bread too.
That's a lot of bread.
Bread, even the bread has these very precise instructions.
Yeah, so it's not just an afterthought. The accompaniment seems almost as important as the animal itself.
Absolutely, it's all part of the ritual.
Yeah. Okay, so what happens to all this bread?
Well, one loaf of each type goes to the priest, who splashes the blood of the fellowship offering on the altar.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay, and what about the meat from the thank offering? Any specific rules about that?
Oh yeah, definitely. That meat has to be eaten on the same day. It's offered no leftovers allowed until the next morning.
So you gotta have a feast that day.
Pretty much, yeah. And I think this really emphasizes the whole celebratory nature of the thank offering. You know, it's about sharing a meal together and expressing gratitude.
Makes sense. Okay, so what if the fellowship offering is for a different reason, like to fulfill a vow or just as a free will offering? Do the rules about eating the meat change at all?
They do a little bit. In those cases, you still got to eat the offering on the day it's presented, but you can have leftovers the next day.
Okay, so a little more flexibility.
Yeah, but there's a strict deadline. Any meat left over until the third day has to be burned.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and eating it at that point is like a big no-no.
Yeah.
It makes the whole offering impure.
And who's responsible if that happens?
The person who eats it, they're the one who messes things up.
Okay, so there's a clear timeline here. You gotta eat it within that specific window or it becomes ritually unclean.
Exactly. Those boundaries are important.
Yeah. Which brings us to the whole idea of ceremonial cleanliness in general. You know, how does that play into all these offerings?
Well, the text is very clear about this too. If any of the meat touches something that's ceremonially unclean,
Yeah.
you can't eat it. You got to burn it.
Okay, so no exceptions.
Nope. And only people who are themselves ceremonially clean can eat the meat from the fellowship offering.
So when you say ceremonially unclean, what does that actually mean?
It basically means being in a state of ritual impurity, which would prevent you from participating in sacred things temporarily.
Okay, so there are certain things that would make you unclean and you'd have to go through certain rituals to be considered clean again.
Right, exactly. It's all about restoring that ritual purity.
And the consequences for ignoring these rules about cleanliness are pretty serious.
Oh yeah, big time. If someone who's unclean eats any of the fellowship offering meat that belongs to the Lord, they're cut off from their people.
Wow, that's a harsh punishment.
Yeah, and it's the same deal if someone touches something unclean, like it could be a person or an animal, or even just some object that's considered unclean, and then they eat the offering meat without purifying themselves. First, they get cut off too.
So these rules about cleanliness, they're not messing around.
Definitely not. They really highlight how important it is to maintain that ritual purity when you're interacting with the divine.
Yeah, it's all about those boundaries, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about something that seems to apply to all these different offerings, the forbidden foods.
Right, the dietary restriction.
Yeah. So the Lord tells Moses to tell the Israelites what they absolutely cannot eat.
And first up, we have a very clear prohibition against eating any fat from cattle, sheep, or goats.
Oh, right. That was part of the offerings we talked about earlier.
Exactly. So you can't just eat that fat. It's sacred.
But there is like a little exception, right, for animals that died naturally or were killed by other animals.
That's right. You can use the fat from those animals for other purposes, like making soap or oil.
But you can't eat it.
Absolutely not. And if you do, guess what happens?
You're cut off.
You got it.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme.
It is. And it really shows how seriously they took these rules.
Okay, so it's not just fat that's off limits.
Nope. There's another big one.
But
You got no consuming blood from any bird or any animal.
yeah.
Doesn't matter where they live, it's all forbidden.
And I'm guessing the punishment for eating blood is
Cut off.
cut off. Yeah. Okay, so we're seeing a pattern here.
Definitely. These prohibitions probably had some deep symbolic meaning, maybe connected to the sanctity of life.
Yeah, like blood often represents life itself, right?
Exactly. And it plays a crucial role in atonement, too.
So these dietary laws, they're not just random rules, they're tied to all these deeper concepts.
Right, they're all interwoven.
Okay, so let's get back to the fellowship offering specifically and talk about the portion that goes to the priests.
All right, so anyone who brings a fellowship offering has to bring a specific part of it as their contribution to the Lord.
And they present it in a very particular way, right?
Oh yeah, it's all very symbolic. They have to present the fat and the breast of the animal with their own hands.
Oh, wow. So it's like a personal offering.
Yeah, and then the breast is waved before the Lord as a wave offering.
Interesting. What do you think that symbolizes?
I think it's like a gesture of dedication,
Yeah.
presenting it to the divine.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And so the priest burns the fat on the altar, right? That's the food offering. But what happens to the breast?
Well, the breast goes to Aaron and his sons.
Oh, okay. So that's their share.
Yep, a kind of compensation for their service.
Right. And then the right thigh of the animal also goes to the priest.
Yes, as a contribution.
So it's like a specific cut of meat for them.
Exactly, a little bonus.
And there's another distinction within the priesthood, right? About who gets the thigh.
Yeah, it's not just any priest. It's the son of Aaron who performs the ritual for that specific offering.
Oh, so the one who offers the blood and the fat.
Exactly. He gets the right thigh as his share.
It's like a reward for doing the work.
Yeah, you can see it that
It's
way.
all very structured and organized.
Definitely a well-defined system.
And the text even explains where this whole system came from.
Right. It says that this waved breast and the presented thigh were taken from the Israelites' fellowship offerings and given to Aaron and his sons forever.
Wow, so it's a permanent arrangement.
Yep, for all their generations.
Yeah.
And it even links it back to the day when Aaron and his sons were first chosen to be priests.
So it's like a divine decree.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
not just some random thing they decided to do. It was established by God.
Wow, so these weren't just temporary arrangements, they were meant to last.
Right. A fundamental part of the whole system.
It really shows how interconnected the community and the priesthood were, through these rituals.
Absolutely. It's all about that relationship.
Okay, so to wrap things up, the regulations end by stating that all these instructions for the burnt offering, the grain offering, the sin offering,
Good guilt offering.
Yep, the guilt offering, the ordination offering, and the fellowship offering, they were all given to Moses by the Lord at Mount Sinai.
Directly from the source.
Yeah. So there you have it. A deep dive into the fascinating and sometimes confusing world of Levitical offerings.
Right.
We covered the guilt offering, the most holy one, with all those specific procedures and the restrictions on who could eat it.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how the priests get certain benefits from the burnt and grain offerings.
And we spent quite a bit of time on the fellowship offering with its different rules for different occasions
Yeah.
and that big emphasis on ceremonial cleanliness.
Yeah, those consequences were no joke.
Definitely not.
And then we talked about the forbidden foods, no fat, no blood.
Right.
And finally, we looked at the priest's share of the fellowship offering and how it was all established way back at Mount Sinai.
It's really amazing when you think about the level of detail in all these regulations.
It is, right?
It really points to a highly structured religious system. Every little thing mattered.
Yeah, from the specific cuts of meat to who could eat what and when they could eat it.
And all those rules about consumption and purity, they really underscore how sacred these actions were. Maintaining those boundaries between the sacred and the profane was crucial.
It really makes you wonder what all this meant for the people back then,
Right. What did they believe about the world and their place in it?
Yeah, it wasn't just about presenting something to God. It was about all these relationships and responsibilities and symbolic actions within the whole community.
And between the people and their God.
Exactly. So I'm going to leave you, our listeners, with something to think about.
Okay.
How do these ancient ideas of offering atonement and communal meals, how do those resonate with us today?
Right. Do they still have meaning for us?
Yeah. Or do they seem totally foreign? Are there things we do now that are kind of like these offerings, even if we don't think of them that way?
What are our modern rituals?
Yeah. And what do they tell us about what we value?
It's definitely something to ponder.